Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to AnTalk, the weekly comic conversation. Happy Halloween. So, recently, I've been catching up on the animes known as Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate. Based on the manga that started in 1998, there are two different versions of this anime. First version, simply titled Hellsing, first aired in 2001, consisting of 13 episodes, each of which a little over 20 minutes in runtime. The second version is titled Hellsing Ultimate, which first aired in 2006 and consists of 10 episodes ranging from about 40 to 50 minutes each. Although the 2001 version Hellsing was the first adaptation of the manga, it came out at a time the manga was still ongoing and not yet finished, forcing the anime to take their story in a different direction about halfway through the season. I've never read the manga, but this is information I've researched online now that I've been watching the shows. Now, Hellsing Ultimate, which came out a year later, was an attempt to remake the anime and follow more closely to the manga. In both series, the overall premise and main characters are the same. The Hellsing organization is basically a secret militant group established generations ago, trained to defeat and protect England from the likes of vampires, ghouls, and other supernatural evils. Their leader, Sir Integra Hellsing, who inherited her position from her father, it's their family's tradition to lead the Hellsing organization. She is also the master of one extremely powerful vampire and the star of the show, Alucard, who is her right-hand man and most powerful weapon in their ongoing war on vampires. Rounding out the main characters is Saras Victoria, a young adult female who in the first episode becomes a vampire under crucial circumstances and is then taken under the wing of Alucard as she becomes an agent of the Hellsing organization. Now, if you're into darker tone or more violent anime, Hellsing might be for you. I'm a big fan of anime, and having recently watched both versions of Hellsing, I gotta say, this is pretty cool. Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate are gothic, horrific, violent, graphic, and it portrays the idea and lure of vampires and even its relationship to religion in some ways, the only way anime knows how, in the most badass way possible. The way the rules of a vampire is set up in this is to be able to be turned into a vampire, you have to be a virgin of the opposite sex of the vampire that turns you. If you're not a virgin and a vampire turns you, then you turn into a ghoul. And ghouls that get risen from a vampire basically are under that command of that vampire. They basically serve them till that vampire ceases to exist or they are killed again themselves. In both versions, who I would say is my favorite character and who I would assume is the fan favorite is Alucard. He's an ancient, powerful, pure vampire who has a lot of charisma and has a lot of likability if you're a viewer, for sure. Who wound up under the command of Integra's father. When he passed, mastership of Alucard fell to her, so now he serves her, slaughtering lesser vampire scum whenever is required. He's really badass, and he finds pretty much everything humans do amusing, as he struggles to find a being worthy of competition. Both series are pretty cool. Hellsing kind of has that classic anime charm, while I'd probably have to say Hellsing Ultimate might be the better version. Whichever version you prefer is really up to you, but either way, the premise is pretty much the same. If you're into horror/action type anime, then you may really enjoy Hellsing. It has some cool themes and images, and some cool side characters, like Walter, Integra's servant, who is much more than just that, believe me. Or their constant rivalry with the Vatican and their agent, Father Alexander Anderson. There are many differences and similarities between the two versions, but without trying to spoil too much, let's go into the differences between Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate. First, let's go over the animation. The overall character designs are essentially the same in both versions of the show, but the animation is quite different. Distinctly two different shows without question. The original series, Hellsing, goes with a more classic animation style in terms of anime, Even though this is a graphic show either way and has some darker and sometimes extreme images, the original is much more simple and classic. And I don't mean dull. This is a very unique show, but the animation in Hellsing Ultimate is really a step up and much more detailed. Ultimate also has a lot more gore and has a much more darker, more horrific feel, which I think is more suiting for the show. A show that's about vampires and supposed to be horror based should have a lot of blood and gore. The action scenes in Ultimate are a lot more detailed, and I would just say an overall improvement on the original series. Like I said, I like the animation of the original show, but I gotta say Ultimate takes the cake and is much more visually appealing and a lot more fitting to the tone and style of what the show's about. Now let's move into the differences between Alucard. Alucard in both versions is pretty much the same, not that far off. I thought Ultimate was going to have more of him, judging by the first couple of episodes, but we actually get a couple of episodes without him. I'll admit, I watched the original in English and Ultimate in subtitles. I actually like Alucard in the original series quite a bit, and the English voice actor who does him is pretty cool. Alucard is a character who is mysterious, fearless, fearsome, and always has a certain charisma about him, but if I had to choose between the two versions, even though Ultimate may be an improvement in a lot of ways, I think the original Alucard is a little more charming and fun to be around. I'm not sure if this has to do with watching them in different languages or what, but either way, both versions are cool. I see Alucard as somebody who's very scary, very dangerous, but at the same time, you feel more comfortable when he's around. Also, and I didn't realize this until like halfway through the original series, which I watched first, spell Alucard backwards. Saras Victoria. The look and character of Saras Victoria is pretty much the same in both Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate, except for maybe her hair, which is blonde in Ultimate and is more red in the original. She has pretty much the same introduction, or at least the situation she's in is the same. But a big difference, at least to me, in the first episode of both versions, she's part of a police force that gets slaughtered by a vampire priest, basically. When Alucard shows up, she gets taken hostage. Alucard gives her the choice of becoming a vampire, so he can shoot through her, ultimately killing the priest, and then save her by turning her. In the original version, it seems like much more of a choice. Alucard asks if she wants to go with him, and she says yes. In Ultimate, he just asks her if she's a virgin, and when she says yes, he shoots her. While she's dying, he asks if she wants to be turned. Pretty different situations in my opinion when it comes to making a choice. After becoming a vampire, Alucard basically takes her under his wing. He will be her master until she drinks his blood. After becoming a new recruit to the Hellsing organization, the original series really takes its time on her and her adjustment to her new life. She's hesitant to kill at first, and she refuses to drink blood right away. She comes off as very eager, loyal, and good-hearted, and she really views Alucard as her mentor. She's pretty much portrayed as the main character in the original series, in my opinion. Ultimate spends a lot less time on her. She goes through training a lot faster, and there really isn't much to her, especially once the story gets going. Sometimes I think they made her too much of the silly anime girl you find in a lot of shows. But as the season progresses, she really turns into quite the powerful vampire. She gets really badass and fearless, and the darkness inside of her really starts to show in her fight scenes, and she almost goes into a blind rampage as she's slaughtering her enemies. That's pretty much the difference between Saras Victoria in Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate. Now let's get into the story. The story starts off pretty much the same in both shows, other than our main characters being part of the vampire killing Hellsing organization. The actual story kind of kicks off with an increase in vampire attacks and ghouls. At first it's uncertain as to why, but they discover that artificial vampires are being created with a special chip. Like I said earlier, I've never read the manga, so I can't speak to how accurate each or either version is, but knowing that Ultimate is closer to the manga, I think it's really easy to tell where Hellsing back in 0102 ran out of source material. Like I said, the events in the beginnings of both versions is pretty spot on. The difference is the events that make up pretty much the whole first half of the original series gets covered in pretty much the first 2 episodes of Hellsing Ultimate. Part of this is because they have longer episodes, but they definitely fast track some of the things in Ultimate, as to where I feel like Hellsing tried to take its time, and it really tried to spend more time on characters, especially Saras Victoria, and tried to focus on her adjustment to being a vampire and becoming a member of the Hellsing organization. Hellsing takes its time with story and character, where Ultimate focuses more on the overarching story about the artificial vampires and who's behind it all. And in the second half of the season is basically an all-out war against them. You want to know who's behind it? I'll tell you. So, spoilers. Who's making this vampire army but a Nazi organization? So essentially you have Dracula versus a Nazi army of vampires. If that's your thing, then you'll love Hellsing Ultimate. Hellsing from 01 starts off with the realization of the artificial vampires, but really changes course when it has to part from the manga and never really gets too deep into it. I think they may have wanted to, but as we can see, they never got that far. One other quick thing I do want to mention about the original is I really don't like the theme music. The opening theme or the end theme doesn't really set the mood for what I'm going for when I go to watch Hellsing. So those are some of the main differences and similarities between Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate. There's probably definitely more, but like I said, I don't want to spoil too much for you if you might be interested in watching these. But whichever one you prefer, like I said, I enjoy them. I'm a big fan of anime, especially action anime, and you throw in this horror theme with vampires and Dracula. It's actually kind of cool. Even though I have never been like one that was into the whole vampire thing, like around the Twilight era and all that. But Hellsing, if there was a movie about Hellsing, I would be all on board for that. So yeah, definitely check it out. Definitely a good anime for this Halloween season. It's very gory, graphic, and horrific with cool characters and a cool premise. So yeah, that's Hellsing versus Hellsing Ultimate. You tell me which one you prefer in the comments below. And what's your favorite horror-based anime? Let me know. This is AnTalk, the weekly comic conversation. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy Halloween. Take care.